Today we are in chapter 34, and this is not the most fun chapter to read. In fact, it's not a lot of fun. We find that Jacob has settled in this land of Shechem, and he is not supposed to be here. And God had told him to return to the place where he first encountered him, Bethel, and he decided to deviate and go to this land instead. And so that's where we find ourselves. And before we even get into what the chapter says, I want to note that there is a truth that when you are in a lack of obedience, maybe disobedience, maybe rebellion, straight up just not wanting to do what God is telling you to do, it actually puts you at a place that is a dangerous place because it removes the protection that God has promised. When we are walking in obedience, it doesn't mean we have to be perfect. Obedience doesn't necessarily mean perfection, but obedience means our heart is chasing after what God is telling us to do. Now, we'll make mistakes, those things, but when we're in disobedience, meaning we know exactly what God wants us to do, sometimes it may be different, sometimes it's not clear to us, but once we know, there is a certain thing that happens where when we come into disobedience, it's as if God's protection is lifted from us, as a way to get us back into obedience, not as anything else other than to guide us back to where we're supposed to be. I know in my own life, I've experienced this at times when I was not doing what God was telling me to do. Those were some of the toughest times of my life because God was trying to show me that without him, I can do nothing. And so we find this place with Jacob, and we remember God changed his name to Israel, but it's interesting that throughout this chapter, they call him Jacob. And I think that the reason that the writer does that is because he's acting like Jacob. He's not acting like Israel, not acting like the man God wants him to be. He's acting like his old nature self, which we do all the time, right? You and I are guilty of that. But so we find that they're in this place and that Dinah goes out, and in essence, she is raped. And not a lovely situation, right? And so they come back, they find out, and it says that Jacob held his peace until her brothers came. In other words, in this culture and in most cultures, it is the father's duty to go back and take care of that matter. But he held his peace. And why I think that they call him Jacob here is because I think he's afraid again. Remember how he was afraid to go to Esau? He was afraid to do these things. And I think we see that happening here again, that he's afraid. And so he doesn't say anything, but then the brothers come and they are angry. And so we see that the brothers act kind of like their dad. They go into this state of manipulation. They act like they're trying to work this out with this family that has done the wrong to their sister, but instead they are tricking them, and they convince them that yes, if you get circumcised, then we will allow her to be married to you and we'll marry your other wives, which would be out of God's plan. God wanted them to go back to the promised land, to the promised people. And here they are mingling with people. They're being in places they're not supposed to be. And when we're in those places, we see that we make really terrible choices and a lot of terrible things often happen. This doesn't mean that if you have terrible things happening to you, you're in a bad place. There's still a Satan out there that's here to kill, steal, and destroy. But you find that when you're in these places of disobedience, it happens more often and usually in a stronger sense. And so we see that they trick this whole village into getting circumcised. And then while they're recovering, they come in and they kill them all, kill all the men, take the women and children and all of the things that they own there. And so they literally pillage this village. And you see at the end, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have ruined me, making me infamous and embroiling me with the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And we are few in number, and they will gather together against me and attack me." And I think in this moment, this is a moment of selfishness. How many times have we been going through things and we can only see our view? And here Jacob, his daughter has been defiled. She has been raped. His sons have done these things, and all he can say is, "Oh my goodness, look what you've done to me. Now I'm afraid they're going to come after me." And I think so many times Satan loves to get us at this place where all we can see is our own situation, our own problems, our own issues. And here Jacob is almost having this pity party of, "Oh my goodness, what have you done to me?" Not realizing that his whole family is in a state of mess. Not realizing that his daughter is probably in detriment. She is probably, frustrated, sad, all the emotions that come along with being raped and groomed, because we see that he then he tried to convince her that that he wants to be her husband and all of these things, and was speaking to her heart. And so we often know that is something called survivor syndrome, where they fall in love with their captors because it's their only hope of a change. And so she's in this state of chaos as well, and all Jacob can think about is himself. And his brothers call it right. They said, why did we have to deal with this? You should have taken care of this, Father. And so I think we leave this chapter seeing that Jacob needs to stand up and be Israel, not Jacob anymore. And so today I just encourage you, as you think about this story, it's not a lovely story, it's not a fun story, but I think God puts these in the Bible to show us that life is messy, that things happen, that there is stuff that we have to deal with, and no one's immune. And I think he writes these things in here so that we can see that and we can learn from it, that we don't want to be in disobedience, and opens up doors that our families can be harmed, our personal lives can be uprooted. And so today I encourage you, are you in the middle of the storm? And if you can only see what's happening to you, then take your eyes, look up, look to God, and see what it is that he wants you to do. Are you in obedience right now? If you are, stick with it. This terrible things don't necessarily mean anything. But if you look up and you say, I know I'm supposed to be doing something else, or I know I'm supposed to be somewhere else, follow that leading so that you can get out of these messes in your life.